I never expected a quiet winter walk to turn into a fight for a child's life. But the moment I heard the ice crack, instinct took over. I threw myself flat on the frozen lake, inching toward a little boy slipping beneath the water. Saving him felt like the only thing I'd done right in months. But just as I dragged him to safety, shivering and gasping, a man stormed toward us with rage burning in his eyes. Instead of gratitude, he accused me of something unthinkable. That was the moment I realized saving the boy was only the beginning. The wind cut across the frozen lake like a blade, sharp enough to sting my cheeks as I hurried toward the pier. Winter in Westbury was always harsh, but that morning felt different, too quiet, too cold, as if the world was holding its breath. I had only gone out for a walk to clear my mind. My life had been stuck in a fog since losing my job at the fire station. 15 years of service, and suddenly I was just someone without a purpose. So I walked, every morning, no direction, just to keep myself standing. That was when I heard it, a thin, trembling cry. At first I thought it was the wind playing tricks, whistling through the trees. But then I heard it again, desperate, high-pitched. "Help! Somebody help!" My boots slid across the frost as I ran toward the lake. In the center, not far from the old fishing cabin, I saw a boy, no more than 7, flailing in a patch of dark water where the ice had cracked open. He kept slipping, trying to grab the jagged edges. "Hold on!" I shouted, my voice echoing across the frozen surface. The boy didn't answer. He was too busy fighting to keep his chin above the water. Instinct kicked in, the kind that never leaves you, even when the world decides it no longer needs you. I dropped onto my stomach, spreading my weight across the thin ice. Every inch I moved made the surface groan beneath me. "Don't let go," I whispered to myself, inching forward. Just a little closer. The ice around the boy was broken, shining like shattered glass in the pale winter sun. I could see his lips turning blue. His eyes, wide with terror, locked onto mine. "I've got you," I said, stretching my arm out. He tried to reach back, but his fingers slipped beneath the water. I lunged, ignoring the crack beneath my chest, and caught his jacket sleeve. The shock of the icy water splashing against my wrist burned like fire. "Pull," I urged him. "Come on, help me help you." He did. He kicked weakly, and together we managed to slide his upper body onto the ice. The sound of another crack split through the air like thunder. My heart jumped. "Don't move," I breathed, but really I was saying it to myself. If the ice gave way now, we'd both be pulled under. Slowly, painfully, I dragged him across the frozen sheet toward safety. Each push felt like an hour. Each creak felt like a warning. Finally, we reached thicker ice near the shore. I lifted him into my arms, clutching him close, feeling his trembling through my soaked gloves. "You're safe now," I murmured. But then, a shout behind me. "What the hell do you think you're doing with my son?" I turned. A tall man was sprinting toward us, fury twisting his face. And in that moment, before he even reached me, I knew something was terribly wrong. The man's boots pounded against the frozen ground as he approached, his breath clouding in sharp bursts. The boy in my arms trembled violently, clinging to my jacket as though afraid of what would happen next. Not the cold, but the man running toward us. "Oliver!" The man shouted, voice cracking with panic. The boy winced at the sound of his name. I lowered him carefully onto the snow, keeping one steadying hand on his shoulder. "He's all right," I said calmly. "He fell through the ice. I just pulled him out." But the father didn't hear a single word. He grabbed the boy's arm, dragging him away from me as if I were the danger. The child winced in pain, and something in me tensed. "What were you doing with him?" the man demanded, his eyes wild. "Why were you out there? Why were you even near him?" My breath hitched. The accusation struck harder than the cold. He fell in. I heard him scream. "I helped him," I said. But the man's suspicion only deepened. "You expect me to believe that?" he snapped. "A grown man with no reason to be near my son? On a deserted lake? You think I'm stupid?" I stared at him, stunned. "Are you saying I pushed him in?" The father's jaw tightened. "I'm saying I don't know what you did." "But you're not touching him again." Oliver tugged at his father's sleeve weakly. "Dad, he saved me." But his voice was so faint, so fragile from the cold, that it barely rose above the wind. The man didn't even look at him. He just wrapped his coat around the boy and kept glaring at me like I was a threat instead of the reason his child was breathing. "I'm calling the police," he said firmly. "This isn't right." A dull ache spread through my chest, not from the cold water soaking through my clothes, but from something deeper. After everything I'd lost, the job, the identity, the sense of worth, this felt like another blow. Another reminder that maybe the world didn't see me the way I still tried to see myself. "Call them," I said quietly. I have nothing to hide. His eyes flicked over me, assessing, distrusting. Then he scooped Oliver into his arms and started toward the road, muttering curses under his breath. I stayed behind on the ice, breathing hard, my soaked clothes stiffening in the cold. The wind howled louder now, pushing against me like it wanted me off the lake too. Just when I turned to leave, I saw a figure jogging toward us from the trail, an older woman with a bright red scarf flapping behind her. She waved frantically. "Are you all right?" she called out. Before I could answer, she looked past me toward the father carrying Oliver. Her face shifted. "Oh no," she whispered. "Not him." I frowned. "You know him?" She swallowed, anxiety in her eyes. "Everyone in Westbury knows him. And trust me, you're in trouble." The woman's words lingered in the cold air, sharper than the biting wind. I pulled my wet jacket tighter around myself, shivering, not only from the cold, but from the unease her tone carried. "In trouble?" I asked. "Why?" "He thinks I hurt his son. I don't even know the man." She sighed, stepping closer, her boots crunching through the frost. "His name is Daniel Whitmore. People around here call him untouchable. His family's owned half the businesses in Westbury. For 3 generations. Money, influence, and a temper that scares even the calmest folks." I glanced toward the road where Daniel had disappeared with Oliver. He jumped to conclusions. "But once he calms down, when he calms down, he usually gets meaner," the woman cut in softly. "If he's already convinced himself you did something wrong, he'll make it a war. No one in this town wins a fight against him." Her words settled like stones in my stomach. I'd faced burning buildings, collapsing ceilings, and lives on the edge of ruin. But nothing terrified me quite like an accusation I couldn't disprove, especially one that involved a child. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Evan," I said. "Evan Carter." Her eyes flickered. "Carter. You're the firefighter who lost his job last year." I stiffened. Small towns had long memories and long whispers. "I didn't lose my job," I corrected. "I was forced out after the budget cuts." But even as I said it, I felt the familiar sting of humiliation. The same sting that had kept me away from most people in town. "I know," the woman said with surprising sympathy. "But Daniel doesn't care about truth. He cares about what he decides is true." She offered a hand. "I'm Margaret. I walk the lake every morning. I saw you run across the ice. You saved that boy. If I hadn't been so far behind, I'd have seen everything." Hope flickered in my chest. "Would you be willing to tell the police that? In case this gets out of hand?" She nodded. "Of course. But you need to prepare yourself. Daniel won't let this go. He'll twist it until you look guilty just for being in the same square mile as his son." A deep breath escaped me in a plume of frost. The victory of saving. Oliver suddenly felt small against the storm forming on the horizon. "I didn't ask for any of this," I murmured. Margaret placed a gloved hand on my arm. Heroes never do. We began walking toward the road, our steps slow, each crunch in the snow echoing the weight of the moment. The sky above grew darker, as if warning me of what lay ahead. When we reached the parking area, a police car was already there, lights flashing silently in the cold morning. Daniel stood beside it, arms crossed, eyes fixed on me with an anger that bordered on hatred. Oliver, wrapped tightly in a blanket, looked pale but awake. His eyes flickered between his father and me, silently pleading. The officer turned toward us as we approached. "Are you Evan Carter?" he asked. My throat tightened. "Yes." The officer's voice was steady, but his eyes carried a hint of uncertainty, as if he wasn't sure whether he was speaking to a hero or a criminal. I forced myself to remain calm, though my pulse hammered painfully at my temples. Daniel stood a few steps behind him, jaw clenched, hands balled into fists. His rage radiated like heat, almost visible against the icy landscape. "What exactly did Mr. Whitmore tell you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. The officer flipped open a small notebook. "He claims he found you on the lake with his son, who was soaking wet and half-conscious. He believes you pulled Oliver onto thin ice and caused the fall." My chest tightened. "That's a lie." I heard the boy screaming. "I went out to save him." The officer hesitated. "Do you have anyone who can confirm that?" Margaret stepped forward immediately. "I can," she said firmly. "I saw him crawling across the ice to reach the boy. He risked his life." Daniel scoffed loudly. "Oh, please. You didn't see what happened before that. You don't know what he did out there." Margaret glared at him. "And you don't know Evan. He didn't hurt your son. He saved him." Oliver tugged on Daniel's sleeve again, voice weak. "Dad, he helped me." But Daniel silenced him with a soft, stern squeeze on his shoulder. Not now, Ollie. My heart ached at the sight. The boy looked down, as though his truth wasn't welcome in his own home. I don't need to argue with strangers, Daniel snapped. Officer Hayes, do your job. Hayes exhaled, visibly uncomfortable. Mr. Whitmore, I do have to take everyone's statements. I don't care about statements, Daniel barked. I care that this man had his hands on my son. My temper flared despite the cold weighing down my limbs. I had my hands on him because I was pulling him out of freezing water. So you say, Daniel growled. But you were out there alone with him. No one saw how he fell in. Margaret stepped closer, her voice sharp. Are you honestly trying to blame the man who saved your son? Daniel ignored her entirely, focusing on me like a predator locking onto prey. Here's what's going to happen, he said, voice low. You're going to answer every question Officer Hayes has. And if I find out you touched my son without reason, even for a second, I will make sure you never step foot in this town again. A coldness deeper than winter spread through me. This wasn't fear of the law. This was fear of a man who believed he owned the truth. Officer Hayes finally raised a hand. All right, that's enough. Mr. Whitmore, step back. Daniel reluctantly moved half a step. Hayes turned to me. Evan, I need you to come with me to the station for a formal statement. It's standard procedure. Daniel smirked, satisfied. I felt the weight of the moment pressing down, heavy and unfair. But I nodded. Fine, I said quietly. I'll cooperate. As I stepped toward the patrol car, Oliver's small voice broke through the wind. I'm sorry. The police station in Westbury was small, just 4 rooms, a receptionist desk and a few faded posters about safety on the walls. Yet when I walked through the door with Officer Hayes, it felt like I was stepping into a courtroom where the verdict had already been written. Hayes guided me into a narrow interview room, offering a towel for my wet clothes. We'll try to keep this quick, he said quietly. You're shivering. Comes with saving a life on a frozen lake, I replied, forcing a half smile. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, Evan, the situation's complicated. Daniel is. I know exactly what Daniel is, I cut in. Everyone seems to. Hayes didn't argue. That said enough. He set a recorder on the table, pressed a button, and nodded. Let's start. Tell me exactly what happened from the moment you arrived at the lake. I repeated everything, from hearing the boy scream to crawling onto the thin ice and pulling him free. My voice shook at times, not out of fear, but from reliving the uncertainty, the cracking ice, the boy's frozen fingers slipping. Hayes listened closely, occasionally writing notes. When I finished, he leaned back and exhaled. Your story lines up with what Margaret said, he admitted. So I'm free to go? Not yet. My stomach tightened. Why not? He hesitated. Because Daniel is filing an official complaint. Claims you endangered his son, possibly intentionally. That forces us to investigate. I stared at him, incredulous. I saved him. He'd be dead if I hadn't acted. I know, Hayes said softly. I believe you. But Daniel controls the narrative in this town. And when he pushes, people follow. I felt the familiar burn in my chest, the same one I had felt when the fire department pushed me out. Not because I did something wrong, but because someone else's influence mattered more than the truth. This is unbelievable, I muttered. Before Hayes could respond, the door swung open. A woman I recognized immediately stepped inside. Detective Clara Turner. Sharp, confident, always in control. She'd investigated fires I'd once responded to. Carter, she said with a nod. Heard you had an eventful morning. Eventful isn't the word I'd use, I replied. She took a seat across from me. I've spoken with Daniel. I clenched my jaw. And he's insisting you were loitering near the lake, watching his son before Oliver fell in. Says you were acting suspicious. My heart dropped. That's a lie. I know, Turner said. But Daniel isn't just filing a complaint. He's demanding protective action for his son. He's claiming you're dangerous. Something inside me cracked at the edges. Dangerous. The same word used against me after the department downsized. The same word that had followed me like a shadow. And what do you think? I asked quietly. Turner studied me for a long moment. Her voice softened. I think you're a man who saved a child and is getting punished for it. Relief washed through. Detective Turner closed her notebook and leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes fixed on mine with a seriousness that made my breath catch. Evan, she said calmly, Daniel is claiming that you've been seen near the lake multiple times in the past weeks. He's suggesting you were watching children. The words hit me so hard I felt physically stunned. Watching? That's insane, I snapped, unable to keep my voice steady. I walk there every morning, alone, to clear my head. I know, Turner replied, raising a hand to steady the air between us. But you need to understand, he's not just trying to paint you as careless. He's trying to paint you as a threat. A threat? My voice cracked between disbelief and anger. I dragged his son out of freezing water. If I hadn't been there? He knows, she said quietly. That's what makes this worse. A man like Daniel doesn't like being indebted to someone he doesn't control. I leaned back, running a hand through my damp hair. The room felt smaller, suffocating. So what now? Will I be arrested for saving a life? No, Turner said firmly. Not unless he produces actual evidence. And he can't. I hope he can't, she murmured. And something in her tone made my stomach twist. Before I could ask what she meant, the door cracked open again. Officer Hayes stepped in, looking even more uneasy than before. Detective, he said, Daniel is demanding to speak with you both. He's in the lobby with Oliver. He refuses to leave until his complaint is processed immediately. Turner sighed, frustration darkening her expression. Of course he is. I stood. I'm going with you. Turner hesitated. That might make things worse. Or it might make him see I've got nothing to hide. She studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. All right. But stay behind me. We walked out of the interview room and into the lobby. Daniel stood near the reception desk, pacing like a caged animal. His arm was wrapped tightly around Oliver, who looked up with tired, frightened eyes. The moment Daniel saw me, he froze, and his expression morphed into something poisonous. You've got nerve showing your face, he spat. Turner stepped forward. Mr. Whitmore, I need you to calm down. I will not, Daniel thundered. I want this man kept away from my son. I want him on record. I want— Dad, stop, Oliver interrupted softly, tugging at his sleeve. Please, he saved me. Daniel's jaw flexed. He didn't even look at his son. You were in shock, Ollie. You don't know what happened. I remember, the boy insisted, voice trembling. He grabbed my jacket when I couldn't. I couldn't hold on. Enough, Daniel snapped, tightening his grip so much Oliver winced. I stepped forward instinctively, anger burning through the cold. Don't touch him like that. Daniel whirled around, face twisted with fury. Don't you dare tell me how to handle my child. Turner moved between us immediately. Everyone stop. But Daniel, Detective Turner led me outside, away from the heated argument still simmering inside the police station. The winter air bit into my damp clothes, but it helped clear the fog from my mind, at least enough for me to speak. What do you mean he's just getting started? I asked. Turner exhaled, watching her breath drift upward. Daniel Whitmore lives off control. When something slips beyond his reach, like his son almost dying, he looks for someone to blame. You're the perfect scapegoat. My jaw tightened, because I was there. Because you were the only one there, she corrected. And because you don't have the social shield he does. No power, no network, no family name. The truth stung, but I couldn't deny it. She continued, lowering her voice. He's already calling lawyers, threatening to take this to the county prosecutor. If he pushes hard enough, he might force a temporary order, something restricting you from being near minors or the lake. Until the case is closed, my heart dropped. On what grounds? There's no evidence. He doesn't need evidence to cause chaos, Turner said. He just needs noise. And Daniel is very, very loud. A humorless laugh escaped me. So what? He can ruin my life because he feels embarrassed? Her silence was answer enough. I rubbed my forehead, frustration boiling under my skin. I should talk to him again, explain, make him see reason. No, Turner's voice sharpened. You don't understand people like him. Reason isn't part of the equation. His pride is wounded, and prideful men don't listen. They hunt. I swallowed the lump in my throat. The image of Oliver's small, frightened face replayed in my mind. I hadn't realized how much that kid's safety had already begun to matter to me. He's hurting Oliver, I whispered. Did you see the way he grabbed him? The kid flinched. Turner's expression softened. I noticed. But unless the boy speaks up, or someone else witnesses something, there's nothing we can do. He tried, I said bitterly. But Daniel silenced him. That's exactly why Oliver won't speak. He's terrified of disappointing his father. A pause stretched between us, heavy and cold. Finally, Turner added, Evan, go home, warm up. Let me handle the paperwork and the statements. Margaret's testimony helps you, but you need to prepare yourself mentally for the backlash. Daniel won't stop tonight. I nodded, though it felt like a fragile gesture. As I turned to leave, Hayes stepped out of the station and jogged toward us. "Evan," he called. "Before you go, Daniel wants you to know he'll be filing the complaint within the hour." My stomach dropped. "Of course he will." Hayes hesitated. "For what it's worth." "I believe you." "Thanks," I said, though the word tasted hollow. Belief didn't stop consequences. I headed toward my old pickup truck, boots crunching the snow. My body was exhausted, my clothes stiff from the freeze, but it was nothing compared to the weight pressing down on my chest. The drive home felt longer than usual, even though my cabin sat only 10 minutes from town. Snow covered the winding road in thin patches, and the evergreens on either side towered like silent witnesses to the mess my life had suddenly become. By the time I pulled into my driveway, exhaustion wrapped around me like a second skin. My clothes, stiff with dried lake water, cracked slightly as I moved. I rushed inside, turned the heater on high, and peeled off the layers, letting the warmth soothe my frozen limbs. But warmth couldn't reach the storm brewing inside me. I replayed everything: Oliver's frightened eyes, Daniel's accusations, Turner's warnings. It all tangled in my mind until I could barely breathe. I had done something good, something right, something that should have mattered. Yet somehow it was turning into another battle I hadn't asked for. A knock on the door snapped me from my thoughts. For a moment, dread gripped me. I expected Daniel, ready to escalate things further. Instead, when I opened the door, Margaret stood there, bundled in her red scarf, cheeks flushed from the cold. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said softly. "No," I replied, stepping aside. "Please come in." She entered and unwrapped her scarf, looking around with kind, observant eyes. "I wanted to make sure you were all right." "I'm trying to be," I admitted. "Hot shower helped. But my mind's a mess." She nodded knowingly. "Daniel's temper is notorious. He doesn't think before he swings, verbally or otherwise." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Why is he so angry at me for saving his kid?" "Because he wasn't the one who saved him," she said simply. "And because in that split second, you were the person Oliver needed, not him. That terrifies a man like Daniel more than anything." Her words struck deeper than I expected. "I don't want a war," I murmured. "No one does?" she sighed. "But sometimes trouble comes even when we're trying to do the right thing." She placed a small paper bag on my table. "I brought you something. Hot soup. Figured you needed it." The gesture warmed something inside me that the heater couldn't. "Thank you," I said sincerely. Margaret smiled, though it wavered slightly at the edges. "There's something else you need to know." My stomach tightened. "What?" She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Daniel went straight from the station to his family's law firm downtown. I saw him storming inside. He's not just filing a complaint. He's demanding legal action. Something about endangerment and inappropriate contact." "Inappropriate contact?" I repeated, stunned. "I didn't even touch the kid except to save his life." "I know," she said firmly. "But Daniel twists the truth to match his pride. And he's powerful enough that people will listen before they question." My chest burned with frustration. "So what do I do? Hide in my cabin while he paints me as some monster?" Margaret took a slow breath. "No, Evan, you—" The courtroom was quieter than I expected. No whispers, no murmurs, just a strange stillness. Like everyone sensed that the truth hovering in the air was finally ready to land. Maya sat 2 rows behind me, hands folded tightly, her eyes swollen from crying the entire night. For once she wasn't hiding. She wasn't pretending. She wasn't performing strength. She just was, broken but honest. The judge flipped through the document slowly, almost too slowly. Every turn of a page felt like a drumbeat against my ribs. These papers held everything: the loan slips her mother hid from her, the bank statements, the text messages proving she had tried to protect me, even while begging her own family for mercy. And yes, the IQ test result too. The judge had requested it only because Maya mentioned, in her confession, that she had spent months trying to be good enough for me. It wasn't to embarrass her. It became proof of how far she had gone, how much pressure she had carried. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Arjun, Mrs. Maya, I have reviewed all evidence." Maya squeezed her eyes shut. I saw her shoulders tremble. She thought she had lost me already. That this was just a legal confirmation of the emotional break she felt last night. "From what I see," the judge continued, "this marriage has been harmed not by malice, but by misunderstanding, fear, and external pressure. Mrs. Maya's actions show desperation, but also unwavering loyalty. And Mr. Arjun's reaction, though harsh, stems from betrayal rather than hatred, silence. Even I didn't breathe. Therefore," the judge said, "my recommendation is simple. Both of you must choose. Right here, if you want to mend or end. Legally, emotionally, completely. He leaned forward. Do you want a divorce? Or do you want a chance? My throat tightened. This wasn't the question I expected, but it was the one my heart had been wrestling with since last night. Maya looked at me, tears slipping down her cheeks. I didn't want to fail you, she whispered. I didn't want to lose you. That's why I lied. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I trusted you too much. Something cracked inside me, not pain, not anger, something softer. I stood slowly. Your Honor, I said, voice low. I overreacted. I felt betrayed. But after hearing everything, I realized she wasn't trying to fool me. She was trying to protect us, and I walked away from her when she needed me the most. Maya gasped, covering her mouth. I turned toward her. If you still want this marriage, I said gently, I want it too. Her cry broke instantly. Pure relief, pure release. She rushed forward, and the judge allowed her to stand beside me. You'll rebuild slowly, he said. But sometimes the bonds that break and mend become stronger than before. As we walked out of the courtroom, Maya slipped her fingers into mine. Arjun, thank you. I'll never hide anything again. And I'll never judge you again, I whispered. Outside, the world felt brighter.